Today's lecture is going to be about needs assessment. We talked a little bit about needs assessment when we talked about a developmental program or a comprehensive program altogether. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about a needs assessment for this topic. In Dropbox, you're going to find a couple of PDF files that have several different needs assessments in them. And then at the end of the lecture, there are some links to some online surveys that we can look at. And we'll talk about those specific ones more in class when we're together. So there's two primary purposes for why we do a needs assessment. One is to understand the needs of the different subpopulations within your school community. You want to be sure that your program's not targeting just one aspect of your stakeholders. So you want to make sure that you're getting information from teachers, from parents, students, and administrators. Then the other one is really the purpose is to drive your comprehensive program. Everything that we should do should relate back to that needs assessment. So this will help you to determine your priorities and what your goals and objectives will be. They also allow you to look at continuous improvement. So if you've done a needs assessment in a previous year that maybe is related to a satisfaction survey, then you can see if that improves later. Let's say one of your pieces of data that you're looking at is the number of students that have applied to a college by the end of their first semester of their senior year. And you can look and see if that improves later on. And then it also helps you to address any community concerns or issues that may be out there. Our needs assessments always need to be data driven. So in doing that, we're basing this upon the real needs, not just somebody's perception or what somebody thinks. It's somebody's opinion, that you really have pulled together the information to indicate that it really is an issue that needs to be addressed. An example of that would be, a teacher says, I think there's lots of problems with bullying on our campus, but then you survey the students and they don't report that. So that would be an example of basing it on a perceived need based upon a real need. Although, you always want to look at your results and your data together, you also want to disaggregate it. So when it's aggregated, it's all together. When it's disaggregated, it's broken down into different populations or different groups. And that way you can get a good feel for who might have a particular need. It may not be a need that's addressed by all individuals in the campus, but a certain population does do it. So you want to ask some demographic information when you do the survey so that you can break it down that way. You want to break it down by male or female. You want to break it down by grade level. Parents of 9th graders may have different needs than parents of 11th graders. Or, 4th grade students may see something as a problem where 1st grade students don't. You also want to be sure that you understand the difference between norm referenced and criterion referenced. Okay, norm is based upon comparing to a group. Criterion is based upon can you demonstrate mastery of a certain set of criteria, and it's only looking at the individual to the criteria. So the TAKS test is a criterion reference test. There are certain standards that it's testing to see how each student performs on that. And we've talked about this a little bit already too. What data is already available on your campus to determine your needs? So those are the big four that we talked about as an example of some. There may be more. So, academic achievement, attendance, behavioral referrals or office referrals, and then suspension. So those are some examples of data that's already available, but you may have other things that are already available to you as well. Okay, so the previous slide talked about data-based or data-driven needs assessments. There are times when it is okay to talk about the perceived based needs assessment. So the data are going to be the ones that we can find hard data on. The perception based are going to be more of your survey type information. I know I kind of talked about that a little bit in the previous slide, and that I probably didn't state that accurately. That data driven are going to be where we have hard numbers on things. So the perception based needs assessments are the things like, what's the morale, what's the culture of our school, the bullying stuff, now bullying, you could have actual reports and investigated reports within the discipline stuff, but then you can also have the perception of students and parents and teachers. And we should do this continuous cycle of assessment in each of the areas, the academic, the career, and the personal social development. So when you're looking at who are you going to assess, what populations are you going to be talking about, the most broad assessment would be all stakeholders. However, sometimes that's just not really practical or efficient. There are times too that you may want to just assess the people, get the perceptions or the information from the people who are the most informed or the most likely to respond to your surveys. So let's say that you do a parent survey and you've got parents, it's somewhere I would put on that survey something that indicates how active the parents are. How many times have you been to the school? Are you attending extracurricular activities? Have you come to PTA meetings? How many times have you talked to the teacher? So if you have these parents who've said they've never done any of these things and they're giving you all this information about the school, then you know that it's not based upon information. They don't actually have that information to share because they haven't been there. But again, you want to look at students, teachers, parents, and administrators. The higher your return rate, the better your data is and the less likely you are to make some type of mistake in analysis of the data, and you can have more confidence in the data being accurate. You want to look for places to triangulate across the populations. So that would be looking at, what are the teachers saying? What are the students saying? What are the parents saying? What are the administrators saying? All about the same topic. When you look at your needs assessment design, if you are going to do your own needs assessment, that you're not going to take one that's already been done, you want to focus on really specifically defined topics or issues. You can use 7 different kinds. You can do questionnaires and inventories. Which would be a survey type thing. You can do analysis of records. You can interview people. You could have small focus groups. You could look at your counseling statistics. It could be included in that systematic evaluation of your guidance program, classroom visits, or you could use an outside consultant to come in and do it. But you need to be objective in how you collect the data and you analyze it. Just as someone, I'm going to tell you, I get a ton of requests for surveys through our professional listserv. It's, people doing research and they try to get you to fill out surveys. And the ones that I look at that say, it'll take 5 to 10 minutes, then I might complete that. But the ones that say it's going to take 45 minutes, I don't have 45 minutes to do a survey. And so they're not going to get a response from me. The ones that say, I'd like for you to interview you and it's going to take, an hour on the phone, I'm most likely not going to respond to that. So think about, if you're sending things out, that you want it to be something that's not going to require a lot of people's time. People are busy and they just don't want to have to spend that level of time or that amount of time on something unless you can give them plenty of notice. Like if you were doing focus groups and it's going to take an hour in that, you might get that, but just give them plenty of time. You also want to make sure that if it's a survey, something they have to read, that the reading ability is appropriate to the population that you're dealing with. And your topics should always be related to your program goals. Everything should come back to that. So the steps for designing are: you decide what you need to know. How are you going to, what's the best approach to go about and get that information? Either find a current needs assessment or create one of your own. Then you want to have other people to look at it and maybe kind of pilot it to make sure that people are interpreting it in the same way that you attended. When I did my dissertation, I did a survey and I piloted it at the 10-year anniversary of our school. And when I got it back, there were a couple of the questions on there that, based upon the response, I recognized that the graduates were interpreting it differently than what I intended. So rather than sending it out to everybody and get it back, and then you go, ooh, I didn't answer that the right way. That if you have somebody to look at it beforehand and, like I said, test it with a small group of people, then you're less likely to have that situation happen. Then you implement the final version, send it out to whoever it is that you're going to be surveying or getting the information from, tabulate, analyze your results, and then you take the results, and that's how you develop your program goals and objectives from that. So here's some design tips. You want to determine what demographic information you need. So do you want age? Do you want grade level? Do you want role? Like what I talked about before about parents, how active or engaged are the parents, things that could give you that information. One of the things to be careful of is, like, if there's a position on your campus that there's only one person that has that title. So like for me, I was always the only school counselor. So if the survey asked me, if counselor was one choice, then they had totally taken away my anonymity. And in that, I probably wasn't as forthright as I would have been if I could have been anonymous. So think about that when you're asking some of that questions. Or am I going to be able to figure out whose answers these are? Your questions be short, to the point, and easily understood. Like I said before, be sure you think about the reading level. For frequency choices, typically you want to use a 3 to 5 point scale. You don't, unless it really is a yes/no question. Have you been contacted by your child's teacher this year? That's a yes or no. But use things like rarely, sometimes, frequently, most of the time, almost always. The more specific you can be within that. So it might be, what's the difference between sometimes and frequently? What's the difference between frequently and most of the time? So if you can maybe give some examples in there, that gets you a little bit more information. Avoid using never and always. You don't want to give forced choices, because there are people like me that read those things and go, well, I can think of an exception, so never always doesn't apply. If assigning answers to the numbers, be sure all your choices are answered. So like if you were going to do, let's say 1 through 5, and you said 1 was never, or 1 was rarely, and 5 was almost always, you want to say what 2, 3, and 4 are. Don't leave some of that up to interpretation. And again, be aware of forced choices that may complicate your interpretation. That if they have to answer yes or no, and it's not really a yes or no question, or you can think of an exception to that, then that kind of complicates things, because different people interpret that differently. So you're going to take this needs assessment data and you're converting it. So if your surveys are designed well, you should be able to do a really smooth transition into your goals and objectives. But then once you do that, you want to prioritize the needs in order of importance and how they relate to the existing program. You want to match those goals to standards, whether those be at your campus level, at the district level, at state or national. And then you want to operationalize your goals into learning objectives. And we'll practice some of this. If you want to look at these online surveys, if I click into them now, it's going to kind of mess up the recording part of it, but you've got the PowerPoint, and so you can go in and look at these surveys yourself if you'd like to, or we can pull them up and look at them in class. So this is the end of the lecture on needs assessment, and again, we'll talk about this more in class and identify which kind you will be doing on your campus.